Let's get this show on the road. I am so pleased to welcome Caryn Kopp, who is best known as the Chief Door Opener over at Kopp Consulting. She's helped thousands of entrepreneurs secure executive level meetings with just about any company you can name. She's a best-selling author and internationally recognized speaker, so I promise you guys are in for a treat. She has been in Inc., in Fortune, in Forbes, in Newsweek. She is a biz dev expert, and I know she's going to have a ton of great stuff to share with you folks. So without further ado, Caryn, you want to take it away?
Well, thank you very much, Scott, and everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to show my screen in just a second, but I want to say how important EO has been for me. I joined EO 15 years ago, and I can actually trace back a year that we tripled in size in our business as a result of something that someone said at one of the EO meetings. So if you haven't checked out EO, you should definitely do that. So EO is in the house, right? All right, so hold on just one second. I'll share my screen and I'll get our little party started here. Okay, I'll open up my chat. Okay. All right, good. So I'm so glad that we're all here together. And one of the reasons why EO asked me to work with HubSpot and be here to bring you this presentation is because for the last 24 years, I've run a company that does outsourced business development, specifically door opening for our clients. We get our clients in the door with their prospects, with the executive level decision makers. And what does that mean for our clients? It means they get to sell more and that the top of the funnel is always full for them. So I've written a book called Biz Dev Done Right, which you can see over here, which is about the blind spots in the sales process that keeps the business leaders from the success they should have. So I thought it might be really interesting for us to start out today together talking about what I call sales truths. I'm going to put up 5 of them, and I'm going to ask you to put in the chat which one speaks to you most, and there could be more than one that speaks to you most. The first one is your best clients and referral partners from before may not be your best ones now. The second one, not all closed deals are the right deals. Number 3, not all sales activities are effective activities. Number 4, not every seller who has successfully switched to virtual selling has also successfully switched to virtual prospecting. And the last one, not all great sales hunters are great door openers. So put in the chat, I'm going to look over here, which one speaks to you most. And I've got a bunch of 3s over here. Ooh, lots of 3s. Not all sales activities are effective activities. Yeah, keep them coming. 2, yeah, a lot of 3s, a 5, a 2. Okay, yeah, so it's really interesting what's happened since the pandemic. The pandemic has changed a lot of things for a lot of people. That's not news to anybody. But during the pandemic, people switched their definition of what was an ideal client and what was an ideal deal from what it was before. But now that we're a couple years later, it's switched again. And sometimes people don't know exactly who their ideal clients are and who their best referral partners are, and may still be working the previous ones. So it's important to know, where are you targeting currently? We're going to talk about that. Not all closed deals are the right deals. I'm going to make some recommendations later about new metrics for sales that I'm suggesting that you watch now. And one of them is the % of closed deals, which are the right deals for you. I have a lot of complaints from business leaders that the deals that their people are closing are not necessarily the right deals. And if that's true, you probably have a targeting issue. We'll talk about that. Not all sales activities are effective activities. And based on the chat, that's a big deal. So that has to do with effectiveness. If your sales activities are effective activities, you are going to get further faster. You're going to get in the door sooner, and you will get to close sales faster. I'll give you lots of ideas for that today. Not every seller who successfully switched to virtual selling has also successfully switched to virtual prospecting. So that's a big deal. Virtual prospecting is different than going to networking events and trade shows. And even now that they're back, what's really interesting in certain industries, that even the in-person networking or the trade shows that have come back, or the conferences that have come back, sometimes the executive level decision makers are not there. They have learned that they can learn everything they need to learn right there in their offices. So sellers have to get comfortable approaching them where they are, and that's virtual prospecting. Not all great sales hunters are great door openers. We're going to talk about that in a little while. It's not everybody does everything well. Certain people do certain things better than other things, and it's important to know which one you are. And if you run a team, which skill sets do the people on your team have? All right. So we're going to make light of this. This is a serious topic, and we're going to have a little fun with it today. But this is how people describe they feel when they hit my doorstep. They're on this side of this big chasm, and they want to get over here to this other side where the prospects are. And they pretty much all say to me, Caryn, you get me in the door, I can close a sale most of the time. I just need to get in more doors and more of the right doors. Well, if you aren't getting in as many doors as you think you should, there's a problem in one or more of 5 key planks of door opening success. And I'll take you through those. Years ago, I worked with an artist on this, and I remember when he drew this door, this was an office door. And I said to him, yeah, it's really not that easy. And so then he switched it to this, it's almost like a bank vault door. And this over here, this was not a lock that was a vault-like lock. It was actually a door handle. And I said, yeah, it's really not that easy. So he drew that vault-like lock. I said, okay, we're almost there. Now, you see the width of the chasm? I said to him, make that wider, because the little guy on the left cannot take a running start and get to the other side. He has to fall in. And so he made it a little wider, and I said, that's it. This is how they feel. And when clients come to us feeling this way, sometimes it's because they don't have enough time to get more of the right doors open. If people are great sellers and they've been successful, their funnels are full and they're working the middle to the bottom of the funnel to get those deals closed. But when they do that, what happens to the top of the funnel? It doesn't always get the care and attention that it should, creating unnecessary peaks and valleys in revenue creation. Sometimes people don't have the talent to get the bigger doors open. Sometimes companies want to swim upstream, go to higher level decision makers, bigger deals, new markets, come out with new offering, and it requires a different skill set. And the sellers on the team may not have that skill set, but if the door is open, they can close all day long. Sometimes people have the time, they have the talent, but they would just rather put a stick in their eye than do this part of sales, which I have to tell you, I appreciate, because that's kept us in business all of these years. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 planks of door opening success. The planks themselves are not going to be a huge surprise to you, but what I'm going to talk specifically about with each plank is the blind spot that trips people up and causes them to not have the most effective sales activities. And this way, that won't describe you. Okay, so here they are, and then I'm going to go into each one. The first one is the right target. Second is the right message, and I mean sales message, not marketing message. The third is the right answers for objections. The fourth is the right door opener. And the fifth is the right execution. Now, if any one of these planks is not in place, the bridge falls in. And that doesn't mean you won't get to the other side. It just means it's going to be harder. And so when people come to me and they say they want to get in more doors, I ask them what they've tried so far that hasn't worked. I put up the 5 planks and I tell them, take a look and tell me which ones aren't working well. And they pretty much can tell me which ones are not working as well as they should. Now, the first one, here we go. The first one is the right target. Notice how the word right was next to every single one, but the right target. Now, write in the chat, tell me a yes if you've ever had the experience of after you're in the door and you've presented a proposal that the prospect has just gone silent, or maybe there's a surprise decision maker at the end that puts the kibosh on your sales. Let me see what you say to me in the chat here. Okay, does it ever happen? Yeah, ARG. Yes, it happens. Okay, so one of the biggest offenders which causes a sale to stall later in the sales process is right here. It's the right target. People will find that those prospects were never really the right prospects to begin with. So if you do a really good, solid job with targeting and you're not spending any time on any targets that don't actually deserve your time and attention, then you should find minimal prospects who go silent, minimal surprise decision makers, because you're only focused on the right group of people. So that's really easy to say, but now let me give you some specifics on how you can actually do that. Okay. So we talk in our company about important wins. Actually, it's a core value that we create important wins, not just any wins for our clients. And you'll see that link periodically through the presentation. I'm actually recording over the next 2 weeks some video that will go in depth in some of these particular areas like target, like message. And if you're interested in receiving that, just go ahead and click that link and put your information in there. So most people, when they're thinking about target, they think about size of company, level of decision maker, industry niche, geography. So those are all good to start with, but that's not where the story ends. When we're in sales and we're trying to take this big world and make it into a smaller world, so we're focusing on only those prospects who are more likely to say yes sooner to the meeting and more likely to say yes sooner to not just any deal, but the kind of deal that you're looking for, a true partnership with your clients. So there are 3 additional filters that we help our clients think through so that when we're putting together the prospect list for our door openers to work on to get our clients these meetings, that we're focused on those prospects who are more likely to become clients sooner. And here are the 3 areas that we focus on: obvious solution, willingly pay, and urgency. So which groups of prospects will find you and your services to be an obvious solution? Once they know that you exist, they would never take a step without you. Well, how do you figure that out? Well, let's say you can find out which prospects have a certain technology, let's say, and if they have X technology, they likely have Y problem. And if you can solve Y problem, that means they may find you to be an obvious solution. Now, any of your competitors can target this way too, and any of your competitors can message against it. But the likelihood is they're not doing that. They're throwing a bunch of prospects on the list, and they're hoping that when they tell them what they do, that magical things will happen. But if you're more specific about which prospects you're selecting and why, then when you talk to them, you can say something more meaningful so they find you to be an obvious solution. Willingly pay. So which ones who find you to be the obvious solution will also willingly pay what you want to charge for your services. It's rare that somebody ends up on my doorstep and wants to sell on price. But if you want to sell on value and you're approaching prospects who want to buy on price, that's a mismatch. And you can give them all the justification in the world, but certain people, no matter how much justification you give them, they are never, never, never going to pay for value. Well, what if you can identify those people who were not likely to pay for value and just not target them to begin with? And as I talked about this video that I'm going to be creating, that you can click on that link, I'm going to give you a lot of examples of how you can identify whether somebody is not likely to willingly pay, how you can identify people who will find you to be an obvious solution so that you can think this through yourself. The last part of that is urgency. So urgency became a really big deal during the pandemic. It's really important, especially in that time period when not a lot of people were spending to find which people would feel urgency despite what was going on. People talk about the recession and people aren't saying yes to proposals and all of that. But you know what? Some people are saying yes. So how do you find those people who are going to feel urgency? Well, one of the best ways that we found to identify urgency is to think about an income statement. What's happening to your prospects' top line revenue? What's affecting that might be creating urgency? What's affecting their supply chain? What's affecting their labor pool? What's affecting their profit? If you look at it this way, you are likely to find something that is affecting things that your prospects are facing that you can help them solve. If you can find that, you can create a smaller group of prospects to focus on and then say something incredibly meaningful that will help them understand why meeting you is going to be the best decision they make all week. If you nail target, the rest of sales is easier. Sometimes people say to me they want to develop their message first and then figure out the target. That is, in my experience, not the way to do this. The way to do this is to find out who you're going to talk to, because then you will know what you can say to them that would be meaningful. So this is like the Venn diagram from 5th grade, everybody. If you can nail this, sales will be easier for you. So the second plank is the right message. What you say to somebody is critically important. People talk about the word persona, but actually that's a marketing term. In sales, you're talking to a person, not to a persona. Let's talk about some of the things that go into sales messaging. And by the way, in my experience, and I'll bet yours too, the person with the best words wins. I have seen companies that didn't deserve to win just because they had the best words. If you deserve to win, you also need the best words. So I'll talk a little bit about how you can develop the best words for you, for your prospects. Now, people think that marketing messaging is the same as sales messaging, and it's not. This is a blind spot. Sales messaging is in alignment with marketing messaging, but it's meant for a smaller group of people. And in the end, it's meant for one person, one-to-one communication, whether it's phone, email, LinkedIn, snail mail. It's meant for one-to-one communication designed to move one person from one place in his or her thinking to the next. And if your messaging, if what you say and what you write to an individual is not helping that person move through your sales process in a smooth way, you probably need to rethink some of the things that you're doing when it comes to sales messaging. So here are some examples. If you change the language, you can change the outcome. I don't know if Scott mentioned this in the beginning, but I had my first cold calling job when I was 11. When I was 11, I was babysitting for a family in the neighborhood, and they had a lawn doctor franchise. And the mother said to me, "Hey, Caryn, you have a good phone voice. Why don't you make some phone calls and see if you can get us some free lawn evaluations?" Well, I found it fascinating as I started making these calls that, first of all, the calls were super short. And second of all, if I said the right thing, I would get the right outcome. If I said something that wasn't right, I wouldn't get the right outcome. And that really started this study of language. And if you change language, if you change a phrase, it can change the outcome. So look at this. So one example is, "I'll call you next week." Well, what if we change that to, "How's Thursday at 10? Think of how much shorter your sales cycle is going to be if every time you talk to someone, you would set a date and time. So people who know me know my mantra is date and time, date and time, date and time. There's always a date and time for every step of the sales process. So instead of saying, "I'll call you next week," and just leaving it out there where you're going to have to call someone over and over again to try and get them to respond, nail the date and time. "How's Thursday at 10? Instead of saying, "I'll follow up with you in 3 months, what if you say, "What will be different in 3 months?" I call this flip the switch language. This is something that you can say to somebody who's saying, "Oh, I don't think so, I'm not ready now," or whatever. usually a question, but it's not always a question, that gets them to stop and think and say, you know what, you're right. Nothing's going to be different in 3 months. Let's go ahead now. And I've seen it over and over again. Get comfortable with proactive language. So now let's take it from the phrase and look at the word, because when you change the word, you can change the outcome also. I'll show you a couple of word pairs right here. So satisfied and grateful. If instead of saying to your prospects, our clients are satisfied, what if you said our clients are grateful? It's an intensity difference, but it's more meaningful. It will land in a different way than just satisfied. In fact, I think satisfied is what I would call a vanilla word. It's like everybody uses it, so who cares? All right, here's another pair. Show and prove. Instead of saying to your prospects, I can show you how this works, what if you say, I can prove how this works? If you change the word, it changes the outcome. So this whole interesting study of words and language led us to 2 trademarks in sales messaging. The first one is called the moment of yes. This is what we use to create the sales messaging that gets the doors open for prospects. And the second one is called the Kopp method of sales messaging, which I'm going to share with you right now. Many times people will say to me that they're trying to figure out how they're different. They want to communicate how they're different. And in marketing, that may be exactly what to do. In sales, I'm going to sit here and tell you with my experience and expertise, no one cares why you're different. Nobody cares. They only care why you are of more value. And if you can articulate that in language that's relevant and compelling to the person who hears it, you win. If you can't articulate that in language that's relevant and compelling, or worse, if you articulate that in a way that somebody doesn't understand what you mean, you don't win. So what you want to do is be more deliberate about the words and phrases that you use. The Kopp method of sales messaging is 3 sentences. It's super simple, and it'll help you communicate the gap between you and your competition. If you do it right, you level the playing field of the competition here, and then create the gap of value for you. When I've seen this done right, it's basically rendered the competition irrelevant. So it's worth it to work on that. Here's the framework, and this is one of those recordings I'm going to make with lots of examples. So if you want that, definitely sign up in that link. Here it is. Anybody can, and you fill in the blank, but not everyone can, and you fill in the blank, for example. And I have an example from the promotional products industry, and I'll share that with you. Anyone can say they provide great customer service, but not everyone can deliver on their promise. For example, we once chartered a plane at our expense to transport supplies on time. So when you create your gap message, and if we had more time, we would have a whole workshop on that. But I'm going to give you the framework and talk about these examples, and then you can always get either the video, or you could get just a worksheet on this so you can work on it on your own. But anyone can say they provide great customer service, but not everyone can deliver on their promise. So sentence number 2 is the critical piece here, because when you create sentence number 2 for yourself, the person who hears it has to nod along in agreement. If they're not going to nod along in agreement, or worse, they don't understand what you mean because there's too much industry jargon, you need to change that sentence. Once you come out with a framework for yourselves, then first of all, make sure sentence number 2 lands. And then I want you to start reducing the number of words in these sentences, because a lot of times people are way too verbose, and this is meant to be delivered verbally. You can deliver it in an email, but it's definitely delivered verbally. Here is the framework again. You guys can take a picture of this so you can start working on it on your own. And you can feel free to send them to me too, and I'll comment on them. I find that a lot of fun and helpful for people. If you want that video, just take a look at that link up in the top. So there's a formula I want you to remember. about sales messaging. Language plus delivery equals outcome. What you say and how you say it determines the result. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of crappy voicemails, emails, and LinkedIn. You can laugh along with this, but actually they're real and they were sent to me, at least this voicemail. Your job when I play the voicemail is to write in the chat, what is the worst part of this voicemail? Okay, everybody understand what they're supposed to do? You write what's the worst part of this voicemail. Here it goes.
Hi, Mrs. Kopp. My name is Michael, and I can be reached at 908-252-2308. Just a little bit about myself. I work with Emerald Financial here in Bridgewater, New Jersey. I work with my partner Ed Lee, and we represent a financial services company that offers insurance and related products and services.
All right, that's enough of that. Okay, crackling and too much about him. Yeah, wow. That's what I said too. Do you know that someday that guy's boss is going to show up in one of my audiences and be just crushed that happened? Phone number with no context. Yeah, it was all about him. He didn't care about me. He started out by wanting to tell me his phone number. I don't care about his phone number. There were a lot of bad parts about that voicemail, but the worst part, in my opinion, is the fact that his boss, Ed Lee, has no idea that he left that voicemail for me as the CEO of my company. I'll never do business with them because if they care so little about me to leave such a bad voicemail, why would I think that they're going to do a good job when it's time to impress me? So be careful about the voicemails you're leaving. I know it's just a voicemail, but let me tell you something. It's one of the easiest things you can correct. When we talked a little bit in the beginning about effective aspects of sales and activities that were effective, well, it's easy to fix a crappy voicemail. It's very hard to come back from that after leaving the impression. Whoops, here are a couple of more bad impressions. Don't bother trying to read that because your prospects won't either. It's way too long. And look at the bottom. I'd love to set a time to meet. Well, get rid of the word love in this aspect of sales because it doesn't matter why Molly would love to meet with Carly. The only thing that matters is why Carly would love to meet with Molly. And that is not what she said. Here's a good one. Now I'm awfully nice because I covered up Michael's last name and hopefully he's not on this webinar today, but look what he sent me. Hi, contact name first. So remember, this is one-to-one communication. So if you don't do this part well, you don't get to do anything else. I know people feel like, oh, getting in the door, it's just a couple of appointments. Well, if you don't get in the door, you don't get to do anything else in sales. And these parts of sales have to go right. Strategy first, then execution. Ready, aim, fire, instead of ready, fire, aim. The right answers for objections, not just any answer, but the right answer. I was on the phone the other day with somebody from a company that everybody on this call would know. It was a salesperson who was trying to get me to agree to an appointment. And when I said to him, listen, what you're talking about doesn't crack my top 5 priorities, he said to me, well, is it budget or is it, what did he say? Or are you overwhelmed? And he must have been reading off a script because what I said wasn't on his script. So he couldn't be in the moment with me. That part of it is really important, to be in the moment with your prospects. It wasn't just one or the other. It was something else, and he hadn't pre-thought that, so he couldn't come up with an answer for that objection. There are 3 P's when it comes to objection answers: pre-think, prepare, and practice. If you spend just a little bit of time pre-thinking what the objections are going to be, you can prepare the answers. And then it's not just enough to have the answers on a piece of paper, but you need to be able to come out with them in a performance moment. For those of you who are leaders in your organization, write in the chat a yes if your company has an objection manual. And as those are coming out, I'm going to recommend that you make sure that you have one. If it's a playbook, yes, it's part of the playbook. But the playbook sometimes will only give you answers to particular objections, but there are different objections for every part of the sales process. And you need to know not just any answer, but what are the right answers. I have a worksheet that will just identify the steps that you need to take if you want to put together your own objection manual for your company. And if you'd like that, just let me know and I'll make sure that you get that. Let's keep going. Okay, so we have the right target, right message, right answers for objection. So then there's the right door opener. The right person doing the work really, really, really makes a difference. And because we've been talking about some very heavy topics here and we're trying to make it a little lighter every once in a while, I'm going to show you a 5-second video. So if you're not paying attention, you're going to want to pay attention to this. It's a 5-second video, comes from the animal kingdom, and it shows that different people, different animals are good at different things. So here we go. So that's pretty impressive, right? It's very interesting. These dogs belong to a friend of ours, and the big dog's name is Charlie, and the little dog's name is Leo. Now, one of the things that is really important is that Charlie can get that door open, and certainly that's no small feat. I mean, he practiced and practiced and practiced. In fact, there are scratch marks all over the door where he was practicing to get that door open. And when I first met this family, they only had Charlie. They didn't have the little dog Leo yet. So I saw Charlie let himself out to go, outside. And I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. That's really a door opener. Instead of a doorknob, it was a door handle, which made it possible for him. But then a couple months later, I came back and they had Leo. Well, Leo couldn't open the door at all. So in the chat, you guys write down why Leo couldn't get that door open when Charlie could. Let's see what you guys say. And Scott, you asked folks to get in touch. Do you want them to go to your form, or should you share email directly? Yeah, you can share my email. It's fine. Just give me a couple days to get back to you guys. So why do you think Leo couldn't get the door open? What do you think? I've stumped the audience. Too short. Yes, right. He was too short. So even if Leo practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced, he was never going to be able to get that door open. But when Charlie opened the door, Leo was able to go through it. So I think you guys know where I'm going with this, is that sometimes it helps to have a little bit of help getting the door open. Because when somebody else gets the door open for a great seller, it's like this beautiful ballet dance that the door openers, like for example, in my company, are keeping the opportunities coming into the top of the funnel, and our clients' salespeople are on those meetings and closing doors and closing the sale more often because they don't have to worry about opening the door as well. So who's going to do this work? How do you figure this out for yourselves? We talked a little bit about this before. TTD, time, talent, and desire. Who has the time in your organization to focus on that group of prospects? And remember, just because you call them once doesn't mean they're going to answer the phone. They need to be called again and again and again with deeper messaging. You can't say the same thing more than once. You really have to think about your prospects. Not everybody has that kind of time. Talent. So this is, I can tell you, I've been hiring this kind of salesperson, the door opener, for 24 years. This is the one thing that we do, and this is the only kind of person we hire. And I can tell you, this is a different kind of person. That it's very rare in my experience to find one person in a seller, one hunter, who's equally great at opening and closing. Usually they're better at one or the other. So if you need an opener, but you hired a closer, keep your closer, but get that closer some help with the opening. Sometimes I've seen people have the time and the talent, but as I said earlier, they don't have the desire to do this kind of work. But that doesn't mean they can't close all day long if they have somebody else opening the door. So it's something to consider if you're looking for more meetings. So now there's the fifth plank. We talked about right target, right message, right answers for objections, the right door opener doing the work. The right execution is the fifth plank. And as I said, if any one of these planks is not in place, the bridge falls in. So the right execution, is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a LinkedIn outreach? What are you going to say on the first try, the third try, the fifth try, the 20th try? Because you can't say the same thing more than once. I talk about the 3 Ps of prospect follow-up: persistence, with patience, without being a pest. You can't contact somebody too seldom and expect to make a difference, and you can't contact them too often and expect them to value the relationship. There is a balance there, and it's really important that somebody is making sure that they're contacting people often enough, and that has to do with using your CRM. So the use of the CRM and the set task feature is something that we promote. It's really important to make sure that you're not missing anybody. If you're going to spend any time on business development and getting in the door, you want to make sure that the time that you've invested is going to result in meetings with the right people. And that has to do with using your CRM really well. Right execution also includes the amount of time you're spending weekly. Now, this is a big offender right here. When people say they're not getting enough meetings, I ask, how much time have you spent over the last 2 weeks on contacting net new prospects? Not filling out the RFPs, not following up on the proposals, net new prospects. How much time? And usually when people tell me it's not enough time to make a difference. So if that happens to you and it's not enough time to make a difference, you either need to make some adjustments in how you're apportioning your time from a business development standpoint and making sure you're spending more time on revenue generating activities versus non-revenue generating activities. And for the salespeople on this call, you may need to talk to your boss about that. And for the leaders on this call, be careful about what you're asking the people who you want to generate more revenue for you, what you're asking them to do. I've seen bosses give a seller who's awesome at outreach and great at closing sales a 3-hour report every single month. Why? Can't somebody else do that report and let your great seller focus on selling? So just think about that from the leader side and from the seller's perspective. Are you spending your time in the places where it needs to be spent? This is my plug for tracking progress and setting tasks. It's critical if you're not going to forget about somebody. You have to be able to find them in your CRM and know where you left off. Otherwise, you may call somebody a second or a third time, not realizing that you've contacted them before and maybe even had a conversation. If you check your notes before you reach out again, you'll start your conversation from a further place, which I highly recommend. So what can you do to be sure that the door opening that you're doing is working? Here are a couple of ideas for you. First of all, focus on only important win prospects. One of the things that we do is we separate the outreach from the development of the prospect list. So by the time our door openers are spending their time reaching out to the executive level decision makers that our clients want to meet, they're not looking up an email address. That's all been done ahead of time by our research department. So we are sure that we have the exact right prospects on the list. Every single prospect has a name of the right title or titles. It could be more than one, depending on your point of entry. And also the right phone number, verified, and the right email address, verified. You get as close to right as possible, and then you start the outreach. Proficiency in using the best sales messaging, including slam dunk objection responses. Leaders, this is your responsibility. Before one of your people starts reaching out to your prospects, make sure that they are practicing that messaging. We do it. We hire only senior level business developers in our company. To work with us, people have to have a minimum of 10 years experience in business development, but most of them have more like 15 or 20 years in business development. Many have been corporate decision makers, and they are not going to start contacting our clients' prospects without passing a proficiency test. They have to be able to use the messaging and be able to also pivot to the left, to the right, because these conversations are fluid. And if they don't know the answer to something, they're going to get shut down. We do not practice on our clients' prospects. And I really recommend that your salespeople do not practice on your prospects. Practice offline in a safe environment. Let them nail the messaging and then let them reach out to your prospects. Those doing the door opening can and will do the job. Hiring this kind of person, a door opener, is different than hiring a regular sales hunter. I'm happy to share some of our interview questions. If people want that, you can write in for me and I'll send you the list so that you make sure that you're hiring people who can and will do the job. This is one of the hardest sales jobs to hire for and the one that has the most mishires. And for those of my EO friends on the call, if you hire the wrong person for the job, it's probably going to take you about 4 to 6 months to realize you have the wrong person in the job. And at that point, you're going to want to just jump out the window. All right. The managers of those of doing the door opening need to know how to diagnose and resolve issues to accelerate results. Many of these people who are the sales managers don't necessarily have the training to know when there's a problem, what the problem is. So we always follow the 5 planks of door opening success. That'll help give them a framework, or you may want to reach out and get some help on that. Minimize non-revenue generating activities. I think I talked about that enough. Consider dividing the aspects of sales, a door opener with one of your best closers, and watch the magic happen. Get outside help when it's needed, but there are certain ways to know if the outside help is going to get you what you want. For example, if you want to get in with executive level decision makers, hiring a company that may hire people who are a year or two out of college, or an actor with a good voice, or a mom who likes to talk on the phone, has a little bit of time, that's probably not going to work in getting in the door with an executive. So you want to make sure when you go for the outside help that you choose the right partner for the job. And then I'm also recommending these new metrics. I threw one out at the beginning of our time together, but I'm going to throw out some more. All right, let's take a look at those. So these are the typical metrics that most people watch. Live conversations, and we define them actually, live conversations with decision makers versus live conversations with assistants. They mean different things to us. Number of calls, emails, number of texts, a number of meetings set, but define what a meeting is. Like, so if I remember years ago, there was a company that ran a sales contest for the number of meetings set. So the salespeople ran around and they were just dropping off manicure, pedicure certificates for people at a front desk, and they were marking that down as a meeting. So leaders, be careful about when you run these kinds of contests that you're defining, what do you mean by a meeting? What constitutes the right kind of meeting? But here are the sales effectiveness metrics that we're coming out with that we recommend everybody watch. The percent of deals which are the right deals, we talked about that in the beginning. The percent of times you're facing each objection, and we're setting up our CRM this way so we can track it for our clients. You may want to do the same thing. So how often are you getting each particular objection? If you're getting 75% of the time when somebody says no or not now, it's because they're not interested. Well, maybe you need to say something a little bit more interesting in your messaging, or you may need to change your target, which would reduce the number of times you're getting the objections. But the only way to know what aspect of the strategy needs to change is if you're monitoring. So percent of time you're facing the objections, really important. The number of open tasks. Now, I already talked about keeping track of open tasks, but if you have too many open tasks, you may be targeting too wide or not spending enough time on business development activities. If you have very few, you may be super efficient, good for you, or maybe you're not targeting as many people as you should. Percent of time on non-revenue generating activities. There's an article on my site I wrote about how you can identify that and what you can do about it if it's happening for you. But this is the winner metric. If you're going to watch nothing else, watch this one, the percent of first meetings which go to second meetings. That one's really important. One of our prospects at one point said that they had 30% of their first meetings, which go to second meetings. And I said that should never happen. If you're targeting the right group of people, you're setting enough value in the meeting, and you're asking for the second meeting, then 100% of your first meeting should go to second meetings. There really should be no reason why not. Don't forget to ask for date and time, date and time, date and time, date and time. And I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. First of all, never give up. People ask me all the time, at what point do you just say, oh, come on, Caryn, you've reached out to somebody for 13 times. Isn't it time to give up? Well, you never know, because if you have done a really good job targeting, there is no reason to give up unless you have gotten new information that leads you to believe that someone is no longer a good prospect. Things change for people all the time. You may just call them the next time, right at the time something changed. So Dan Kennedy has one of my favorite quotes, which is, the difference between garbage and salad is timing. So my message to you on that is hang in there and keep trying, because your competition won't. They are going to give up. And you keep going, develop that relationship, and create this disruptive customer experience, and you will win. So I want to leave you with a question. You can put this in the chat, and then we may have a few minutes for a couple questions. What is the number one reason why sales which should close don't close? What do you think? What is the number one reason why sales which should close don't close? All right, let's see. Timing. Okay, what else? Lack of preparation. Let's get a few more. Lack of follow-up. Yeah, so John, that was the case. That used to be the number one reason why sales which should close didn't close, because of lack of timely and effective follow-through. Since the pandemic, it's changed. That is the number two reason why sales which should close don't close. The number one reason why sales which should close don't close is because people are not getting in the door in the first place. And I gave you all the steps you need, the 5 planks of door opening success, to make sure that for the time that you're spending on business development, you're going to be opening up the right doors, the ones that lead you to the kinds of deals you and your company want. I'm going to put up a slide of how you can reach me. I want you all to link in with me, and you can follow me on Twitter for sure. At the bottom of this page, you're seeing that link. And as I said, this content is going to be super fresh. I'm going to record it over the next 2 weeks. A couple of things you're going to get in there. One is information about the COPGAP method of sales messaging. And I'm going to give you examples and how you can create your own. I'm also going to record a video on the targeting and how you can create a target for yourself that shortens your sales cycle. I'm going to give you lots of examples on that. And there's going to be a couple of other things in there too, which will help you.